questions. So these questions are correct as at the 30th of October 2025, and quite often we polish them when we spot an issue with previous tickets or something that we should know and don't know, then these answers quite often get added to or polished. However, as of today, let's start at the top. The first item is confirm what schemes you are applying for. Delete all but one. I mean, broadly, people are usually applying for SEIS and EIS in a first funding round, but sometimes it can be just SEIS if they're raising, say, 200,000, or if they're raising 400, it would typically be SEIS and EIS. Sometimes it's for a later funding round, in which case it will be EIS only if they are either out of time or they've used all their SEIS or whatever. And then you get to the tricky one. So EIS KIC is knowledge intensive company. This is for companies that meet certain R&D and innovation tests. You can only use KIC when you need to use it, if that makes sense. So there are a few reasons why KFC, Jesus, why KIC is useful. Firstly, it allows you to raise more per year. Secondly, it allows you to raise more overall. Thirdly, it extends the time you can use the scheme from 7 years to 10 years. It also resets. It also has a different definition of when your date of first sale is. So rather than being the date you sell anything for £1, it is the date where your revenue hits. I want to say 200 or 300. I'm going to go for 200, I think. When your revenue breaches 200, that is the start. That is the date of first sale. So it really does push the limits. There's one other reason KIC is useful, and that is to allow each individual investor gets. So I, as an investor, I can invest up to 200,000 in a year under SEIS and then up to 1 million in EIS. You can actually double those up if you've not used last year's relief, because you can go back a year as well, which is a little known fact. But under EIS, you can actually raise 1 million EIS. That's my personal limit per year. But on top of that, you can raise an EIS KIC for up to another 1 million as well. So it's a really nice way of an investor being able to go above that kind of 1.2 million per year across SEIS, EIS. So that's KIC. We have a paper. If you go to the advance assurance, like the customer, the founders advance assurance page, there's a link to our KIC paper, which is on the downloads area on the site, and ditto for EIS condition B that we'll describe in a minute. There's a paper you need to provide. So you can't only, it's not just pitch deck financial model you need from the founder. You also need a KIC or condition B paper. EIS condition B is more clunky than KIC. KIC is pretty straightforward. EIS condition B is where you are moving into a different geographic territory or a different product territory. So, if your business is only selling in the UK currently, but you want to sell in America or Europe, you might use condition B. If your business is, currently you're making, I don't know, remote control cars, and you're going to end up making remote control helicopters, for example, that might be a use of EIS condition B. For me, of all of these schemes, condition B is the most clunky. It's hard to get through condition B relatively, and there are lots of stipulations on the founder. So if you raise £500,000 under EIS condition B, that money is ring fenced for condition B purposes. You can't spend it just on general stuff within the business. It's got to be ring fenced just for that condition B purpose. And there is a test. You've got to raise as a minimum within 28 days, 5 times, no. The average revenue for the last 5 years, half the average revenue for the last 5 years is the rule. So it's really quirky and clunky. I've only ever failed to SEIS, EIS advanced assurances, and one was a condition B, so it stings. If at all possible, we try pushing somebody to either straight EIS or EIS KIC, condition B being, I guess the scheme of last resort. The reason why you can use condition B and not KIC is usually because you're well out of time even for KIC, or it's not an innovation company. So of the two, I'd go KIC first, then condition B. Anyway, it's probably enough of that. Again, you need a paper describing what it does, and there's one in the free stuff stroke download folder. What amount is being sought for? This is the total raise under SEIS. EIS, there's not too much to say for this. One problem we see quite often is somebody's raising 500,000 now and 1 million in a year, and they'll stick 1.5 million here. Don't allow them to do that. The million next year won't be approved. This should be how much the person's going to raise within the next, say, 6 months or so. If you do a submission for the whole 1.5 years, you will get a partial confirmation, which is we'll approve you for the 500,000. We're not doing the million. So it's easier and more straightforward just to drop the million from the application if it's kind of a year down the line or whatever. Does at least one statutory director registered on Company House live in the UK? This is to get through something called a permanent establishment test. And you can drop in the VCMs relating to all of these actually alongside the video. But permanent establishment test broadly means that the company has, a factory or a permanent premises in the UK, or, and it is an or rather than an and, one of the statutory directors lives permanently in the UK. The easiest way by far of getting through that is by having a director living in the UK. HMRC, if you try the first route, HMRC don't accept WeWork, for example, as a permanent establishment in the UK. So that's really clunky, and it is a warning sign. If HMRC see that, the company's incorporated in the UK, but every director's outside the UK, then they'll certainly query how the company passes the permanent establishment test. So that's why we asked that one. Provide copies of proposed investment shareholder agreement and proposed articles. In short, HMRC want to see this, so that's why we ask for the information. This one's very straightforward. If the founder's not going to use our paperwork, they need to provide their own documents. Another quirky way of working around this is just to provide, we could say that the founders are using model articles currently and they're going to use our ASA template, for example. It's one way around this, but broadly they should either provide the documents they're going to use, or I think in 99% of circumstances, we just download the SSA and articles from Founder Catalyst. The area where you can't use the SSA and articles from Founder Catalyst is where it's a foreign company, because our SSA and articles only cover England and Wales. So even if it's a company from Scotland, they need to provide their own documents. That's all I have to say on that one. Number of employees. This one's very ridiculously straightforward. In order to pass SEIS and EIS eligibility, for SEIS you need less than 25 employees. For EIS you need less than 250. So we're asking this question to make sure that the founder is under both of those. Honestly, I've never seen this to be a problem. No founder raising SEIS has more than 25 employees that I've seen, but it's belts and braces really. And one of the items on the HMRC form asks us to confirm this. So if somebody says they've got 27 employees and they're going for SEIS, that is a big red flag. Ditto, the next one. This is around the current company gross assets, or the gross assets at the time of investment, actually, being more specific. We've given the VCM there already, so the founders can look. But broadly, the gross assets of the company need to be less than 350,000 for SEIS and less than 15 million for EIS. Not usually a problem, but there is a nuance here you need to be aware of. That is where if a founder is doing say they're raising £1 million in their first funding round, they're raising 750k from a foreign investor and 250k from an SEIS investor. There is a nightmare scenario where the foreign investor pays the 750k and the bank account, and therefore the gross assets of the company would be way above the 350k, and therefore they couldn't take the SEIS cash, even though in theory they are eligible, because their gross assets are well above the 350 limit. So there is a timing quirk you need to be careful of here. I've only once or twice ever seen this a problem. Again, we need to confirm this in the advance assurance though. Are you trading yet or preparing to? Trading under SEIS means, are you trying to sell your product? So the analogy they use is, if you're opening a shop, you rent the premises, you're not trading. You've put the shelves in and you stack the shelves, you're still not trading. The second you turn the close sign to open on the door, you are trading. That is the definition of trading, because you're inviting somebody to buy your product. Even if somebody doesn't enter the shop for 6 months, even if nobody buys something from a year, the turning of that sign is crucial. It's also worth mentioning a couple of other things. So, lots of people, they need 2 years to develop their product, and they'll do the odd day or two consultancy when they start their company in the same company. That is a start of trading, because they've sold something and therefore they must have been trying to sell something to sell something. So we often see it where somebody does a day consultancy, back in 2021, and that has broken their SEIS, even if they haven't sold their main product yet. So it's worth mentioning. As mentioned in the ticket here, giving away an app isn't trading, so you're not trying to sell anything at that point. Trading also means, so you've got to be careful, is where somebody has undertaken the trade before, and I think we cover this later on anyway, just for belts and braces. But if you're selling, I don't know, a new novel ping pong ball in your company, and that ping pong ball, new novel ping pong ball was sold in another company, then the start of trading date actually goes back before. Okay. Confirm the date of your first commercial sale. Honestly, I can't think much to say here. This again does come back to, even if you sell just a single day consultancy, that's selling, even if it's not the main product you're aiming to. But this one's much more straightforward. Everybody knows what it means to sell something. Not everybody knows what it means to trade. So, do you have any subsidiaries or a group structure? So the reason we asked for this, firstly, HMRC asked us to provide it. Secondly, SEIS EIS needs to be made in the ultimate parent company, and every subsidiary within a group structure needs to be a qualifying subsidiary. It's really complex. It's really horrible. Thankfully, 95% of our customers have a single company. They've got no group structure. So few. If they do have multiple companies, then you need to put that in a diagram with parent company here, and then each of the subsidiaries underneath with percentage ownership and company number and blah blah blah. There are examples on the customer details folder of lots of those, or a few when we've done them. The other thing you need to watch relating to this is, sometimes you can have a founder who thinks they're being really bright. They'll have, rather than owning the shares directly, they will own their percentage of the shares via another company. There is a really weird and wonderful way of breaking SEIS where, if they own more than 50% via their company or via their company and any other associates, then the company they're looking for SEIS EIS for becomes a subsidiary of this company and therefore isn't eligible. It's a real quirk, but it's absolutely one to watch. Has your company ever been a subsidiary? Okay, so we asked this one. There is a really quirky nuance between SEIS EIS. Under SEIS, there is a rule that the company seeking SEIS can never have been a subsidiary. So if it's ever been a subsidiary at all, and the shareholdings have changed and it's no longer, then it's completely ineligible for SEIS. The EIS rule is a bit more relaxed, and that is, EIS says at the point of investment, will it be a subsidiary? So there's a little nuance there. The reason we ask this question here is, if they say yes to this, they can't get SEIS. It's that straightforward. Has the company trade ever been undertaken by any other individual company prior to now? So this goes back to the continuation of trade stroke qualifying new trade. And basically, it's an extension to this. Broadly, if somebody has either done exactly the same trade or if they've done something similar. So, yeah, I'm not going to give an example, but if there is a similar trade, HMRC will spot it. They'll go and look on Companies House. If there's a company that makes bikes now, and that's the one you're going for advance assurance of, and the founder is also a director in a company that also makes bikes, that is almost certainly going to hit a query. So we want to hit that. We want to understand that one head on. Confirm that the investors will get ordinary shares. So best practice, or my best practice at least, is that everybody in a company gets ordinary shares. So founders get ordinary shares, investors get ordinary shares, their nan gets ordinary shares, whatever. There is a potential set of problems where you create, say, B ordinary shares for investors, and those B ordinary shares, have a liquidation preference or some kind of preference over any other share class, in fact, or where a share class doesn't get dividends and investor shares do. This broadly comes down to there's a set of rules, there's a VCM all around this, where investor shares aren't allowed to have any preference over any other share class. I'm absolutely paranoid on this. So if somebody says, investors will not be getting ordinary shares, I'll be all over that to understand why and trying to persuade the founders that that's a bad idea. The area where this doesn't give rise to a preference is around voting. So if a investor shares have voting and another share class doesn't have voting, broadly nobody cares. That doesn't create a preference for the purpose of this conversation. Anyway, the things I love to hear here is everybody's getting ordinary shares. That makes life very straightforward. Is your company unable to pay its debts as they fall due, or other blah, blah, blah? So this, and Emma will dig out the VCM again for this. There is a financial health test. If I can't even remember how this one is applied. I think this only applies to EIS, and I think it only applies, there's a different set of tests when an EIS is outside the initial investment period. If anybody asks yes to this, then go and look at the VCM that Emma's kindly going to introduce. This is a really quirky one. And the only reason I introduced this, I think I did a couple of KICs or a condition B. And actually, it was the condition B that I failed. God damn it. In that example, the company, not only did HMRC agree that it was a different trade, boo, but also the company miserably failed the financial health test. So yeah, we want to find out about this. Oh, we're nearly getting there. I've got 3 minutes left. I'm going to have to pick up the pace. Grants, the reason we ask about this is all around de minimis state aid. So when a company can raise 250k under SEIS, SEIS itself is de minimis state aid, and under EU state rules, a company can broadly only raise 250k in total across all de minimis. So if somebody's already raised 50 grand under de minimis and they want to raise SEIS, the 50 grand comes off the 250k of SEIS and they can only raise 200. That's the reason we ask this, and because the nice people at HMRC want to know how do people know if they've taken de minimis state aid or not? Then any state aid letters they get from LEPS or Innovate or whatever it happens to be, it should state if it's de minimis state aid. They are actually obliged by law to tell founders, but lots of them don't. Have they taken any investment to date? HMRC asked this. We need to know. I don't think there's any real quirks here. You just indicate which and how much and when. The last item here, thank God, is around name, address of potential investors. My standard comment to founders when they go, "Oh, I don't have a potential investor," is you need to name somebody who isn't an employee, broadly isn't a family member, is a UK taxpayer, and could potentially be an investor. The key word being potential there. Every founder overthinks this. Broadly, all you need to do is find, your next door neighbor, a friend from Pilates or the pub or whatever it is, somebody in an accelerator you're at. It really genuinely doesn't matter. As long as they're not a family member, as long as they're not an employee, as long as they are a UK investor and they could potentially invest. The aggregate of the proposed investors that you're submitting as part of this should add up to at least half of the amount the founder is raising at this stage.